I'd love your questions here in the chat. Oh, good. I can see some of the great people on the chat. Florian, good to see you there from Bigas and Riels. Roger, great to have you. I take it you're in Boston these days. Franco de Argentina, que bueno. Reino, enjoying the summer of Finland. I guess now in Finland it's light 24 hours by now. Alba, Russell, Omar from Mexico, Milan, Sam from Saudi Arabia, Viviana, Germany, hello, Morocco, Argentina, que bueno. Milan from India, hey, I like that. Hola from Madrid, Chambéry, nice zone of Madrid. Doha, Qatar, Lithuania. So good people connecting in. In fact, today we're just running on this one microphone and this one camera. So those who've seen my switching from one camera to the other, today we're just going to stick to one camera as we figure out how to integrate this kit into my YouTube approach. But I can see we've got a couple of questions from Roger. And Roger Parker is a writing coach, and I don't know which year it was, but back in 2009 or 2010 I was really stuck on writing. And I remember I was in 2008, 2009 I was a teacher at IESE Business School, and my boss, Professor Brian Leggett, I remember about every 6 months I'd sit in his office and Brian would say to me, towards the end of the meeting, he'd just sort of say, how are the articles coming along? You know, have you made any progress on the cases or a technical note? And I'd go, well, you know, I've been doing a lot of writing. And I'd been a lecturer at IESE probably for 3 years, and Brian from the beginning had said, it'd be good if you could publish a few things. And I just couldn't finish articles or get them written. And I remember I made contact with Roger, and for 1 year Roger was my writing coach. And for 1 year, every week, I can't remember which day it was, but for 1 hour I would be on the phone to Roger. And this was pre-Zoom, pre-YouTube Live, so I just heard a voice over Skype. And I remember Roger would just ask me, how many words have you written? How many words did you write each day? And it was a brutal question, because there were days where I'm sure I sat for quite a few hours with Microsoft Word open in front of me, but distraction had won. And Roger really helped me to get clear that a writer writes. It's binary. If you're producing words, you're a writer. If you're not producing words, you're something else. But you can't be a writer unless you're producing words. And over the year, where 1 hour every week I would connect with Roger, I would have all sorts of excuses why this week had been difficult or this week I had distractions. Roger would just bring me back and say, you know, well, produce words. Don't worry about the quality of the words, first produce words. And I think since that year of working with Roger, it's sort of ingrained in me a habit of, whether it's the blog, whether it's writing in a journal, whether it's just writing in Evernote files as I put my thoughts together. Thanks to Roger, writing, and I guess digital writing, because I've always journaled, but it was turning it into well-structured text that you could actually put as an article, as a technical note, as a case, as a blog post, that Roger helped me achieve. So Roger's question, can writing be considered a form of leadership, especially for self-employed? And I heard a conversation 3 weeks ago between Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. And you know, I think if Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan went live on YouTube, there'd be 50 times or 1,000 times more connected than I would get these days. But in the conversation, Jordan Peterson said that we're at a curious time in humanity, because YouTube video, for the very first time, the oral word, spoken word, is as powerful as the written word. Since the beginning of writing, the only real way that a leader could affect a huge group of people was through the written word. It's only in the last few years of YouTube becoming a phenomenon that the spoken word from someone who's not the president of a country begins to be a way that you can really have an impact on the world, to the degree that the author of a book could reach. If you go 100 years ago, the only way you could reach thousands and thousands of people was by writing something down. Today, through YouTube, right now I'm speaking to 55 people with the spoken word. And Jordan Peterson was saying that we're at the beginning of something very new, where oral, the spoken word is going to become more powerful and a more powerful tool of speaking to masses than it has ever been over the last 2,000 years. But I think in order that your spoken word is a powerful spoken word, it needs to be structured well. And to me, Roger, the only way of doing good thinking is writing. If you're sitting and thinking, and the thinking's in your mind, but you're not putting it down on a page, it can be chaotic in your head, but it can feel clear. It's only when you can structure it on a page, when you can write the words down in paragraphs and you can lay out an argument, that you're really thinking in a way that helps you get clear on how to get your idea out of your head and to another person. So I think writing is thinking. And leadership is two things. Leadership is seeing a change that is required in the world, and then second, bringing together the resources necessary to achieve that change. And the first part, seeing a change that's necessary in the world, defining a change that's necessary in the world, seeing a way the world could be that it is not today. I think writing is the only way we can do the deep thinking that allows us to really get clear on an important vision, and a vision that's important and big enough that it can attract other people. So to me, this would say that writing is not just a form of leadership, it's an essential root of leadership. Now, there may be some rare geniuses that are able to hold an argument in their head and know whether their thinking is fuzzy or their thinking is really well structured and clear. But I've not met many of them. If somebody can't write down in simple terms a structure of the things that are important to them, I think they don't know what's important to them. So for me, a leader that doesn't write some notes down, jot down things, I think they're lucky to be a leader. I think it's a fundamental skill in getting clear on what's important, on prioritization, on getting your ideas into a way that others can engage with your ideas. So probably the second part, for self-employed, can you make money writing? And that might be a better question for Roger. You've worked with a lot of people who have wanted to make writing a more significant part of their activity. I don't know how many you've been able to help to make writing their source of income. But writing as the way we think, so that we can communicate better, so that we can have vision that is compelling and attracts others, I think it's fundamental to leadership. Perhaps the other thing that I notice as a leader is I tend to write down my decisions, and I write down my expectations for how decisions will end up in the world. I remember at the beginning of starting the business that I currently run in Spain, Vistage, I knew that one of the most important skills that I need to develop over the rest of my life is the ability to identify, attract, and motivate leaders of mastermind groups of CEOs, what we call in Vistage a Vistage group chair. Often a retired CEO, someone with 20 years of leadership experience, who has taken a step back from the day-to-day operations of a business, but wants to continue to be engaged and use their experience to help others take the important decisions of leadership. And over the next 50 years of my life, I'm going to be leading Vistage in Spain. And over the next 50 years of my life, I'm going to be recruiting people to lead these groups of CEOs. So 4 years ago, the first training I went to in my capacity with Vistage, there were 10 people in the room. And I was going to be in the room with them for 6 days. And at the time, I knew that 50% of the experienced CEOs that go through this training are successful in launching a mastermind group of CEOs within 12 months. So I remember about an hour into the meeting, I said to myself, right now I need to make my prediction for who in this room I think is going to launch and who is going to give up on the process. And I wrote down, out of the 10 people in the room, the 5 that I most believed were going to be effective. And a year later, I looked back and I now knew who of that group had successfully engaged with CEOs and got a group of them to commit to being in a mastermind group led by them. And I was 100% wrong. The instincts I had of what qualities you need to see in a person so that they have the capacity to be a mentor and a coach to others, to get others to sign a contract and say, yes, I will commit to being part of your group, I'll commit to your coaching. I was 100% wrong in my intuitive sense of why or what you need to see in an individual for them to be successful in this. And I think if I hadn't written that down, I couldn't believe that I could be that wrong. And if I was to live the rest of my life without having written it down and continue to believe that my intuition is a pretty good guide, I would be a disaster in leading this. Over these couple of years, I've learned that, I see the best in people, but you don't often get the best of people. You don't get people's potential. You get something else. But when I'm with someone, I see what they're fully capable of. And this is a great thing if my role with you is a coach. This is a great thing if we're friends. This is a great thing if you're a student in one of my programs. But this is a terrible thing for me if I'm looking to recruit people who will make my life easier. Because I'll recruit you on your potential, but I'm not going to get that. I'm going to get what you normally give. And what I needed to change in my leadership in recruiting is to truly get that my intuition is picking up on things that are not important. And I need to really let some other people around me meet candidates. And I need to really value when they say that they doubt or they say that there's a concern, even if my intuition really feels that I want it. So I think that there's a wonderful TED talk that begins, the lady says, what does it feel like to be wrong? And a couple of people put their hand up and the first person says, horrible, awful, uncomfortable. And she says, those are great answers, but they're answers to a different question. Those are answers to the question, what does it feel like when you realize that you're wrong? You can be wrong, but not realize it for a long time. And for me, what I learned by writing down my prediction of that group of 10, who I predicted would succeed and who I predicted would not succeed, I wrote it down, and a year later I had to accept that I was 100% wrong. And I think if I hadn't been that wrong, I might not have paid so much attention to what I just learnt. But if I hadn't learnt that, this question, what does it feel like when you realize that you're wrong? when I realized how wrong my intuition was in the single most important thing that I need to be able to do for the rest of my life, it's not a nice feeling. But I would rather a couple of hours or days of discomfort than a lifetime of being wrong but not realizing it. And I think it's only by writing down our predictions and then a year later looking and accepting when we're completely wrong and re-examining what our intuition is paying attention to. So for me, writing almost fundamentally is leadership, because leadership is about the future. Leadership is about seeing into the future, but it's about planning that future before you get there, not accidentally stumbling into it. And I think the only type of thinking that allows you to be a good leader is by writing things down, writing down your judgments, writing down your guesses, writing down your predictions, and having a real honest discussion with yourself when your predictions do not bear out in the world. I think Ray Dalio, one of the hedge fund managers that wrote the book Principles, in his company, he had a massive failure early on in his career. And it was something similar where his intuition was misguided. But his intuition gave him a very, very strong sense of being right. And Ray Dalio's company, I think it's Bridgewater or Bridgepoint, he talks about that they have meritocratic weighted decision making. And the way he talks about this is in his company, when the company meets together to take a decision about an investment, everyone in the room has an iPad, and maybe it's a chemicals business in Australia, and the group have to decide whether they're going to invest or not invest. And there's 15 people in the room. Now, those 15 people in the room, the iPad has a system that has kept track of every decision they've been involved with over their entire career in the company. And if they've been right a lot, if their predictions in chemicals in Australia have been right a lot, they get a multiplier effect that their decision counts for more when they touch this iPad. If, on the other hand, their history of decisions, particularly related to Australia and chemicals, have been flawed over and over and over again, this iPad system does some calculation and it reduces the merit and reduces the value of their opinion. So that all decisions in his company, they keep track of them, and then they're aware of in which contexts your opinions really are worthy, and in which context should we ignore your opinions. And I think for me, we need to do this for ourselves more than anyone else. And this idea of the TED Talk, what does it feel like to be wrong? Well, it doesn't feel like anything, because it's only when you realize that you're wrong that you have an opportunity to learn. And in some aspects of my life, I have been wrong happily for decades, but not realizing. And I guess there's a dangerous paradox that sometimes it can feel really good right now to think that I'm right, but actually be wrong. And I would far rather the comfortable feeling of thinking I'm right than the horrible feeling of realizing that I'm wrong. But if you want to lead a good life and look back when you're old and your life be better than it is now, I think writing down your predictions and being brutally honest with yourself, where you are competent and where you are incompetent. One of the areas that I've realized that my intuition is a dangerous tool is personal finance. I am not good with money. I find it very damaging to my ego to admit it. But if I don't admit it and I don't put a system around me that involves other people who are good with money, I will find myself poor all of my life because I value other things. So, a couple of years ago, I just had to admit it. My intuition will always value the person over the money. Will always value doing something fun over the money. And many times this is going to be a good decision, but there's times, and in particular if I want, when I'm 50 and when I'm 60, to have greater resources to have a greater impact in the world, then I needed to accept that something that I feel that I should be good at, I'm not good at. And that's managing money, asking for payment, and saving money, investing money. I am not good at it. That doesn't mean I can just give up and accept that my life is fundamentally flawed. I got a group of people together and put them around me, and in many cases delegate the decision to someone who's going to take a better decision than me. Back when I was negotiating the Vistage partnership contract, there was a moment where I realized that I want this, and that I was going to sacrifice anything because I'd already visualized a future where I was running Vistage. And I actually found a guy who was an ex-investment banker, and I said to him, look, I want this too much. So what I need is that every time I'm sent an updated version of the contract or the negotiation, I'm just going to pass it on to you. You read it, you give your response, send it to me, and I'll just send it back. And that's how I conducted the last 6 weeks of negotiation for the Vistage Spain license agreement. And there's a set of clauses in the agreement that I signed that make the business so much more valuable for me. But they're clauses I would never have negotiated in, because to me what mattered, I had already pictured myself and what my life would be like, and was bored of the contract negotiations. So I pulled in someone and almost just handed it over to them. And I think it's only by writing things down, writing my predictions down, writing plans down, and realizing where I'm meeting my plans and where I'm systematically wrong and systematically not meeting my plans, that I've learned to be able to adjust and bring other good people around me. And it's very hard for my ego to bring someone who's better at finances around me and really accept that they are better than me, that their decision, however wrong or callous or short-sighted it is, they are more competent in this domain than me. So I think Roger, accepting that you're wrong is so hard, and leadership, a great part of is learning and adapting. Right now we're learning and adapting faster perhaps than at any other point in time, with the coronavirus and the impacts to business and the shifting regulations and politics. I think if you're not taking some time each day to write down just what's important, what am I paying attention to, what are my expectations, what are we learning, what do I think is going to happen. If you're not writing that down day after day as we go through this journey, you're going to come out of this experience no better than when you began. And that's a terrible waste of this corona-enforced leadership retreat. So, Roger, long answer, writing is super important. I think there was another question from Roger there, but I can see our chat has flew on down. So, Mag, pick up the voice. We need to get the sound a bit louder. Let me see how. We've got sound on maximum here. So, yeah, there's still some work to get audio fully working through Streamlabs and YouTube Live. Inglese in Pilole. Yeah, I think if you can't admit your flaws, it's really a dangerous place to be. And one of the things that I've learned in determining, can I trust somebody else? Will someone else live up to their commitments? Is, can they be honest about where they're not competent? If someone can be honest with where they are limited, with where they're weak, with where they let themselves down, then you're probably dealing with someone that you can trust. And what's really dangerous is someone who is unaware of their weaknesses. There's a speaker, is Dave. He's called The Freak Factor, and he's like a 7-foot tall guy who dresses in pink. Dave, I'll find the name at some stage, but Dave, The Freak Factor, if you were to search for that on Google, you'll find him. And he's brilliant. He's like this giant, 7-foot tall giant. And he says when he was young, as a kid, he heard from his parents and from his teachers, sit still, stay quiet, do what you're told. And he was often in trouble at school because his teachers would say, Dave, if you could only learn to sit still, stay quiet, and do what you're told, you would do so much better in school. And his parents would sit with him and say, Dave, can't you just learn to sit still, stay quiet, and do what you're told? And he never could, and he almost got expelled from school. He was a disappointment to his parents. He felt he was letting everyone down. And he says, today, he gets paid a fortune to stand on stages, to stand up, to say what he's thinking, and to move around. And if he'd listened to the people telling him to sit still, stay quiet, and do what he's told, he would never have this wonderful opportunity that he has today. And the freak factor, this thing of, his saying is, your strength is always associated with a giant weakness. And sometimes it's harder to recognize the strength than the weakness. But if you can identify where you really are weak, you're going to find that there's a massive strength that is so connected with that weakness. When Dave of the Freak Factor came and ran this session in Barcelona, he said, in our relationships, you can be married to someone and they have a different weakness than you. And what it struck me is I am disorganized. So my great weakness is disorganization, and I'll forget where I left things, and I can get so frustrated with the disorganization. If this camera could see a bit wider, you'd see there's mess just out of camera, because all that really matters to me is it looks tidy in the bits you can actually see. But there's a bit of mess just here, a bit of mess just here, cables over there. And my weakness of disorganization comes with a massive strength of being spontaneous and able to adapt to any situation and able to go with the flow. My wife is hugely organized, is hugely disciplined, knows what's important, where everything is. But if I come home on a Friday night and go, hey, it's a sunny day, why don't we get the bikes and go to the beach? There's a look on her face of, that's not the plan, because the strength of organization and being ordered and being disciplined comes with the weakness of not being able to be spontaneous. And the weakness of disorganization comes with a huge strength of being able to adapt and being spontaneous and go with what's ready at the moment. And I remember when Dave shared this thing that, if the more you can recognize your massive weakness, and he said, be careful of someone with no weaknesses, because there's no strengths. Because it's impossible to have a strength without a weakness. It's impossible that you as a human being have something that you're massively strong, and just so happens that the opposite is also completely full for you. And what his session helped me was to be really happy with finding my weaknesses. And because if I can find a weakness and find that it's massive and it's horrible, it means there's a strength there. And I just need to find out what that strength is and put a structure around me that keeps the weakness from doing great damage and allows the strength to have a massive impact. So, there's a few comments in the chat here about being transparent, being honest, and accepting your flaws. I think it's the kindest thing you can give to yourself, an honesty with where you're weak. And sadly, probably what school gives us, to do well in school, you need to get good grades in all the subjects. To do well in life, you can fail 9 out of 10 of the subjects if you're a master in one. And school probably does a great damage to us in thinking that if you don't get an A in maths and English and history and languages and social studies and religion and sport, you're a flawed student. But what allows you to succeed in life is to realize that you love art. And you're good at maths, but you love art. And if you could dedicate all of the energy to the one thing, it might take you a few years to get there, but you're going to become truly great. And the wealth in our society doesn't go to the person who's good enough at 20 things. The wealth in our society goes to the person who is a true master at one thing. And if you're a true master at one thing and terrible at 80 things, that's probably the price you have to pay. So, some of the sense of honesty, I think, is a realization of how damaging my ego wanting to see myself as good at everything was to my real results in life, and how rewarding a true appreciation of where I really am strong and all the things I shouldn't be touching. And again, Dan Sullivan, I think I rarely go a week without quoting Dan Sullivan, but Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, on his podcast, one of the episodes, he talks about your unique ability. And that if you can recognize your unique ability and work over day after day, week after week, year after year, to focus your efforts more and more on your unique ability, then you're going to really succeed in life. But I guess we have to break the system that school puts into us, where you have to do well on all subjects to pass to the next year. But life, school, if you fail on any one, you stop. In life, you can fail on 100 things if you win big on one. So to me, Florian Cantraver, I can't wait to be there and order the slow cooked lamb and talk about failing, deliberately failing on all of the things that really are weaknesses for you, and hunting down your weaknesses with joy. Because if you find a weakness, I guarantee you're going to find something that is really strong in you. And this is the way that human beings work. But yeah, when you're 15 and in school, it's going to be a very hard belief to cultivate in yourself, to accept that there's an area that really isn't good in you. And I think too many kids at school who struggle in one or two subjects think that they're crap at everything, when really we need Dave, the freak factor, to roll into their classroom and say, the weaker you are in something, the stronger some corresponding thing is in your life. And the most successful adult human beings are ones that have some very deep troughs, but those deep troughs lead to some massive mountains. That the very worst adult human life is one in which there's no troughs but no mountain peaks. So I think here this being absolutely honest and rooting out with joy your weaknesses and labeling them, because your ego will want to pretend that you're not weak. But if you can identify your massive weaknesses and just label them, and now when I recruit someone to work in my business, I have there's a what your job entails document, and basically it's the psychology of working with Conor, and it's got a list of ways of being a hero to Conor, things that will drive Conor completely mad beyond all possible rational understanding. And I tell anyone that I recruit to work with me that they've got two jobs. One is do the work, the other is manage Conor. That I'm leading the business, but I'm not managing anyone. I hire people who will manage me. And I think Dan Sullivan is another time the origin of this idea. Dan Sullivan talks about when he began in work as a coach, and this is 50 years ago, he got his fingers into everything. He did marketing, he did sales, he did event management, he did hotel booking, he did invoicing. He was part of everything, and he felt he should be managing everything as the founder and leader of the company. And the company didn't grow, and it really struggled. And then his wife came along, and I think they married a little late. And when you hear Dan Sullivan speak on his podcast, this lady Babs comes up over and over again, who is his wife. But I think she came in to his life and just saw that Dan is truly brilliant in a couple of things. But in his business, he was trying to give his energy to hundreds of things that he felt that as the leader he should be doing. And Babs worked with the team around Dan and almost cultivated an attitude that the job of everyone who works around Dan is to ensure that Dan never does a task that isn't in his 3 things that he really does well. And Dan, in his podcast, talks about the 3 things that he is really good at. And it's not his job to focus on being there. It's the job of everyone around Dan. And it's in their job description to not let Dan try and put his fingers into something that isn't where he is a rock star. And in his business, Dan tells the team around him, I'm not the leader, I'm a resource. And the job of the team is to make good use of the resource that is Dan Sullivan. And that's an attitude that I really want to cultivate in Vistage in Spain, that my role on paper might be leader. There's a couple of things I do really well. There's a bunch of things that I'll stick my finger in because I feel guilty if I don't. And I'm not strong enough not to have the discipline not to try and do it. I need a team that not just does the work, but almost bosses me around and stops me from putting my fingers into anything that is not the 3 activities that I'm really uniquely able to do. And I think this attitude comes from being honest about what you're bad at. So this session, I guess the theme of today's session was building great teams. And I think fundamental to building great teams is every single individual labeling honestly where they're not good. And a team culture where I don't expect you to be good in everything. I expect you to be brilliant in 2 or 3 things. And we make sure that the team we put around us has the strengths in the areas where we are weak. But it's an obligation of mine that I'm honest with where I'm weak, where I will let you down if I say I will try. And it's human and ego to pretend that I'm good at everything. And there's a joke that a lot of MBA job interviews, people know that you're going to get a question, where are you weak? And people prepare the classic fake answer is, well, weaknesses, people say I'm too generous and I take a little bit too, or people say I'm a perfectionist and the quality of my work sometimes a little bit more than it needs to be. If people give you this answer, they're lying to you, they're not honest, they're driven by ego, not by a willingness to understand how to play as a team. Leo Messi playing for Barca makes no attempt to be a good defensive player, makes no attempt to be a pivot midfield passing player. Leo Messi scores goals. He motivates the team, he animates, but Leo Messi scores goals. And I think in a team, If everyone on a team could play goalkeeper, could play forward, could play midfield, could play right, could play left, you've got a mediocre team. A team of the level of Barcelona Football Club or Real Madrid, your number 10 has to be uniquely brilliant at being number 10. No coach would recruit someone who could be goalkeeper and number 10 as a backup, because what you're going to do is get a mediocre goalkeeper and a mediocre number 10. And it's strange that in business we pretend that we can be all-rounders. And I think it's a lie. So, yeah, asthma, the same example. Yeah, we are dishonest in interviews. And I think there's a set of interviews that you'll assist through a career where it's probably right to be dishonest. Human resources, when I worked for 8 years for a business called Accenture. Accenture is a global management consultant. It hires a lot of graduates out of university, and it's a wonderful environment for your first 3, 5, 7 years of career out of university. You can learn an incredible amount in that environment and be around some really passionate people. But if you were in an interview with human resources, you want to have these fake answers where when they ask you about your weakness, you don't go for full honesty. You tell them, oh, sometimes I'm overly generous and sometimes I work a little bit too hard and I'm willing to sacrifice sometimes my health or my personal life in order to get the job done. This is the dance. But that's okay when you're 20, when you're 25, when you're 30. I think at some point you're going to leave the big corporates and you're going to work in a smaller company. And I guess there is where you're not going to meet someone from human resources. You're going to meet someone who's a teammate. And it's probably a good check of the quality of the company if that teammate can be honest about what's good and what's bad in the company, what's good and bad in their own life. And you can feel that here you can say, there's a couple of things I'm strong in, but there's a couple of things that if you're going to ask me to do, it's probably best that you immediately say no to my job application. And Vistage, we work with CEOs, and the mission of Vistage is to increase the effectiveness and enhance the lives of CEOs. So 2 things: increase the effectiveness. This is help you take good decisions, help you commit to those decisions, help you put in place the team and the processes that make sure that that decision turns into something completed. And enhance your life. And this is the hard one. That your life as a CEO doesn't end up feeling that you're sacrificing your family, you're sacrificing your health, you're sacrificing yourself in order to achieve an objective that you've forgotten why you were doing in the first place. And one of the activities that I ask a lot of our members to do is for a month or 2, just jot down in a diary 2 things: what I've loved, what I've hated. Over the last 24 hours, all the things that gave you energy, that made you feel better, that gave you a feeling of meaningfulness. And in the other column, all the things that sucked your energy, all the people that sucked your energy, all the tasks that you... And, just take note of it for a couple of weeks. And when you've done a couple of weeks of note-taking of all the things that day after day fill you up and all the things that day after day suck the energy out of you, we're going to see some patterns, and some patterns that you wouldn't have been aware of had you not documented them. Because very often the things that suck, each day they're too small to feel that they're significant enough that you should do something about. But when you can see the pattern happening over week after week after week, that a couple of small things or one individual is almost permanently in the right-hand side on this note-taking, you're going to have to act. And for me, one of the things that I would say on leadership is, if you as a leader are burning yourself up in pursuit of a goal, you can do it for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but there's going to come a day when you run out of gas, when you just think, what am I doing? And taking care of your own motivation and being really selfish about what activities, what people, what tasks really are meaningful to you, irrespective of whether they're necessary or not. Be selfish about what fills you up. Because if for the next 50 years you wake up every day and you look forward and you feel meaningful and you like the people and you feel that your day is going to be doing stuff that gives you energy, you're going to put more and more quality day after day, week after week, year after year. And if you can sustain that for the next 50 years, you're going to build an incredible career and life for yourself. But if you don't remove the little small things, the little small irritants, that in the day or in the hour that feels almost petty to comment on it, if you don't remove these, you're never going to maintain that motivation to really make a difference over the next 50 years. So Hunter Massey, great honesty on here. There's clearly distinct levels of honesty that we were looking for in this, and Hunter has really nailed the authentic honesty we're looking for here. So we're coming up to the last few minutes here. If anyone else has honesty of the level of Hunter, happy to see that. Florian, looking forward to Cantraver maybe next week. Franco, what would you recommend to guide our predictions be right, and what to prepare if you know that is a chance to be wrong on those? I think decisions on people are probably the most important decision a leader will take. So your first instinct on a person, if you interview with someone and you're going to hire them, where do you think they're going to be strong? Where do you think they're going to be weak? Is your intuition in a conversation really flawed or really good? So just put down Inglese in Pilole, Dave Rendall. Yes, the freak factor, Dave Rendall. Ellen, what do you think of Dale Carnegie's Win Friends, Influence People book? I think it's excellent. I think it's so I was on a podcast before this call, and Michael Gallant, that runs the podcast, he said to me, Conor, you've got this following on YouTube, you teach in a business school, you must get a lot of questions from students, from people on YouTube reaching out to you. Do you answer them all? And I said no. I said, you very quickly learn as a professor in a business school lazy questions and curious questions. Lazy question is a student that comes up to me and says, Conor, what do I need to do to learn to speak well in public? Like, you could Google it. That's a lazy question. I'm not going to engage. A lazy person is someone who sends me an email saying, Conor, I'm looking for a job. Do you have time for a coffee? I know they're just a taker. Even if they said, Conor, I love your most recent video. I've shared it with my friends. By the way, would you have time for coffee? I'm thinking about some options in my career. I'm much more likely to say yes. And Dale Carnegie's thing is learn to be a giver and a taker. Learn to give people what they need before you take what you need. There's a story that Jim Rohn shares that if you're sitting in front of a fire and it's not giving enough heat, you can't demand that it gives you more heat, and you can't say, look, fire, if you give me more heat, I'll put on some more wood. It doesn't work that way. The way you get more heat from a fire is you get some wood and you put it on the fire. So first you give, and then the fire gives you the heat. And I think Dale Carnegie's Win Friends and Influence People is a little bit of learn to be valuable to others, learn to be useful to others, learn to help others live their life a bit better, and it'll come back. If you give gifts to others, they will return the favor. If you seek transactions, people will quite quickly see that you're transactional. And Dale Carnegie's Win Friends, Influence People, it might be a little bit American, but there's nothing wrong in forcing yourself to think about how you can be of service to others and begin there, and give it freely, not expecting something to come back. If you give it expecting something to come back, it's a transaction. If you give it freely and trust, pretty much it comes back, and often it comes back much bigger and much more impactful than what you had chosen to give. I think there's another saying I heard, I think from James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, which was, if you're helping people from your strength, it's a real service. But if you're trying to help people from something that is not a strength for yours, it's a pain for them and a pain for you. So, I guess a compliment to Dale Carnegie's Win Friends and Influence People is you got to choose to be of service to others from where you really have a strength. And the way that you discover the strength, as Dave Rendell of The Freak Factor says, is, hunt your weaknesses, hunt where you're crap. And if you can find those, and I think here Hunter is pointing out not the type of flaw we're looking for here, but a weakness is, a capacity of organization, capacity of leader. But I guess don't be weak in integrity. Don't be weak in trustworthiness. Be weak in organizational skills with a strength in adaptability. Be weak in marketing but strong in sales. Be weak in copywriting but strong in programming. But it's by finding your weaknesses, and often your weaknesses are more clear to you than what the corresponding strength will be. I think Whitney Johnson said, often you are incapable of recognizing a strength for you. It just feels too easy. And her way of recognizing your strengths is, where do people compliment you on something and you say it's nothing? It's nothing. Where do people regularly tell you words that it's uncomfortable for you to hear? They say thank you and you say, wow, and you're uncomfortable with it. Because it's not effort. It's been value to them, but it hasn't felt like effort to you. And Whitney Johnson, her definition of a strength is this, that it just feels too easy. It doesn't feel right to earn money or to give this, because it just is too easy. It doesn't feel like work. In my case, teaching doesn't feel I should get paid for it. It doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like I make an effort. And when I make an effort, I usually screw it up. It's when I just let it flow, and I'm honest with the person in front of me, that I notice that they've had a moment of realization that's going to make a difference to how they live the rest of the days of their life. So on this note, if anyone wants to be as honest as Hunter, go for that. Perhaps not in this particular chat with your doctor. We're going to close up in the next couple of minutes. Florian loved that Lao Tzu saying, act without expectation. And I think such a good approach to life of give generously and trust. And if you give generously 5 times to someone and nothing comes back, stop giving to them. But don't believe that all humans are like that. Roger, what was the opposite? Lazy or curious? And so this idea of how do I, as a professor, pick which questions I engage with from a student. So there's there's a question from a student that just hasn't explored the resources available to them. That hasn't even done a Google search. Conor, I need help with my career. I don't accept those coffees. Conor, I've got 2 job offers, but I'm really torn between this or this. That I'll have a coffee and we'll spend an hour talking, because they're not asking me to save them. They're asking me to help them when they're already doing the work. And very quickly, as a professor in a business school, you learn to spot someone who's basically saying, save me from myself. Help me because I'm too lazy to help myself. And if in the business school environment you're not quick on spotting the difference between someone who just wants to suck your energy versus someone who has done the work and it's going to be a rewarding conversation, you're going to get exhausted by engaging with students. So on that note, Pablo Vildasola, great to see you on here. I hope the pool's now open in your building and you invite us over soon. Chris Vermeulen, great to have you on here. Thank you for your comment. Russell, selfless generosity. Yep. And I think, Russell, selfless generosity, but you're taking notes, because not everyone is trustworthy and not everyone deserves to be a bottomless pit of your giving. And part of trusting others is to be selective about how you deal with other people. And some people are fully worthy of selfless generosity because they're trustworthy. Other people are sometimes worthy of selfless generosity. And I think in the words of Mikel Yadot, who spoke to our Vistage members this week, it's a blank canvas. And part of being a human and living your own human life is deciding how you're going to paint the canvas of your life. Which people you're going to put in the center and which people you're going to put off the side and which people aren't going to make it onto your painting. Jagannath, great to have you. Pankaj, thank you for being here. Vlad, great to have you here. We're going to pull it towards the end now. Alan Noonan, our Irishman in German, logs on the fire, absolutely. Asma, great to have you. Banu, have a good one. Gianosh, see if there's any last question before we round it up. Pankaj, fabulous, thank you. Kelvin, sometimes I find if I'm honest with myself about weakness, I become less angry and begin to think how I can make it better. That makes me feel peace and good. Yeah, I think compassion for yourself, self-compassion. And for me, learning to tell myself that things that I did yesterday or a week ago or when I was 25, it was the best thing that Conor could do at that stage with that context. And the fact that now I realize I should have done something different, that's now. I'm wiser now. But back then, compassion. And compassionate that we are human. And human is to be flawed. Human is not perfect. And learning, I guess, to laugh at ourselves as human beings rather than try and pretend and put ourselves on a pedestal and hold ourselves up to something that is above being human. Which doesn't mean be a victim and give up and be lazy. So, right. Nikolai, every Friday at the moment while we're in this sort of lockdown, every Friday I'm going to switch on the camera, and thank you to all of you for helping me because I learn by talking. So, here I might be doing a lot of the talking, but the fact that I know that I have 76 of you listening helps me with my thinking. So I do feel that this is a two-way thing. It's not the two-way thing that I miss of a business school classroom at IESE, 70 MBAs, executive MBAs in the room. I do miss the physical presence of having people in the room. But whilst coronavirus gives this global digital option, Nikolai, hope to see you next Friday. Mag, hope to connect with you over the next 50 years. Horatio, there are no mistakes but steps. Yep. Nikolai, thanks. And X, will do. Chris, thank you. And X. Josep, hey, Josep, great to have you here. Gianosh, see you next Friday. Lisa, so we're going to go 3, 2, cheerio, 1.